So we are all very fortunate to have amidst us His Grace Ameyatma Prabhu. Ameyatma Prabhu's brief introduction. Prabhu is an initiated disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He joined the ISKCON movement in 1973. He has a keen interest in electronics, art, music, religious history and Vedic philosophy. He led Electronics and Multimedia Department of the Fate Museum project, eventually serving as the Worldwide Audiovisual Minister for ISKCON. Prabhu was Sri Sri Rukmini-Dwarakadish's main pujari at Los Angeles Temple, which is the Western world headquarters of ISKCON. Prabhu has written extensively on dharma, GBC responsibilities and the systems of initiations. So we heartily welcome Prabhu, and Prabhu has chosen to speak on Ritvik issue today. So we'll have multiple associations with Prabhu on this subject. I request Prabhu to please enlighten all of us.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki. Jayom Vishnu Bhagavan Bhangsha Pradvagacharya Asta Tata Satta Shishi Vadas Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki. So, where are all of you from? Your various locations? As Prabhu said, I found Srila Prabhupada's books in 1970 in the library. I was on a journey, a spiritual journey, and I started as a Christian, and so I was trying to find. Once I became a Christian, I tried to preach to the first person I tried to preach to, a friend of mine, and he, I told him I had given myself to God's mission to preach God's word. So he was like, he said, well, he doesn't want to go to heaven. So he telling me this, that he was, because he said that his idea, he was Catholic, and his idea is that God is an old man, and that you can't, he wanted to have fun. And he said, God's an old man. He doesn't know how to have fun. He doesn't want to party. He doesn't want to listen to rock and roll music or, different. So, and then he said, I would be as bored as hell in heaven. He said, flying around with little wings, flying around in the clouds, playing boring music on a harp. He said that would be like hell for him. He wanted to have fun. And he said, that wouldn't be. So I said, well, no, God's not like that. And living in God's kingdom isn't like that. So he asked me then, so what do you know? What do you know different? And I thought, I didn't know, but I do. God isn't like that, but I didn't know who God was. So that put me on a journey to find out who God really is and what he looks like and what he does, what I would do in the spiritual world. So that took me on a journey first in Christianity, and I couldn't find the answers. No answer in the Bible. What does God look like? What does he do? What am I going to do if I go to his kingdom? It's not there in the Bible. But I was still a follower of Jesus, and Jesus said, I have many more things to say, but you don't have the ears to hear. So then I went to I was thinking, well, I'm just trying to find out who God is, and there are other religions. So I went to Islam, and basically the same thing. Well, first I went to Judaism. That's the same thing, Old Testament. And I went to Islam, and I, started reading, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Cain and Abel, and it's the same story, same. So it's all on the same basis. But there's no real description of God or what he does. So I was on this journey, and it took me finally I found Buddhism, Eastern thought, and then I finally came to Vedic understanding and found a Bhagavad Gita, but not Prabhupada's, but that changed everything. because I was trying to find out what God looks like. And now I got the teachings, and they're vastly superior to any other religion I had come to. But it's still another year. That was in 1969 when I just got out of high school, was going to college. And then I found that Bhagavad Gita in the college library. But I kept going. I was on a search and everything. Then I finally realized that to find, it was actually one of Vivekananda's books, that if you want to know who God is, then you need to find a person who is already, pari patena pari prasnena sevaya. So it's, if you really need to, you need to find the person who's already knows God, and then he can reveal it. So then I understood I need a spiritual master. And so I was trying to find a spiritual master in the library, because that's where I was finding all my, that's what I was a library person. So that's where I was finding all my knowledge. And I was reading about all the different gurus, existing gurus, some recently passed gurus, and none of them were, and my idea qualified. I'd found an Upanishad, 16 books of the Upanishads were in the library, and that was my reference. And then I kept praying, and finally, one night I prayed really hard that this is it. It was a showdown. I was telling God, at first it started humble, that I wanted to find my spiritual master, and I wanted to find a book that he had written that would tell me everything about God. And so but it started off humble, but then it was a challenge. I was telling God, you have to send me my guru now. I'm done searching. I'm done trying to find, you have to send me, and he's going to come in a book. I'll go to the library, because every time I go to the library, there'd be different books. I won't explain everything, but there was a librarian that was supplying the books. So, anyway, when I finally, that night was Friday night. The next afternoon, I went to the library, and all the books I would find were down on the lower shelf on that one aisle. But I was looking for a really old book, because I thought my spiritual master must have lived, because the Upanishads I had read were written were written actually in the 1800s. And that book that I found was republished in the 1930s or so. So I was thinking my spiritual master must have lived a long time ago. And that he had written this book, and I'll find it, and it'll tell me everything about who God is, what he looks like, what he does, what I will do. So I was looking for an old book. And when I was looking down for the books, I couldn't find anything. But there was something started flashing above me. And I thought, that's a brand new book. I'm looking for an old book. And so I ignored it, and it started flashing again. And then I looked, and it's a silver cover with 5 red letters on it, KRSNA. This was the summer of 1970. And then I was thinking, Krishna? And I took it off, and I saw the dots under the R and the N and the S. And from the Upanishads, I had started to read the Sanskrit and use the same diacritics. And so as soon as that was a re sound, and that's a sh sound, and I turned it over, and as soon as I said Krishna in my mind, there's Radha and Krishna on the front cover. And so Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I was looking for a book that would tell me about what God looks like. And on the cover, here he is. I didn't have to read a word. There's Radha and Krishna standing there, and they're standing in a pastoral setting. There's a cow behind, there's peacock, So I understood this is what the spiritual world looks like. And just from the picture, Prabhupada said that his paintings that he made in these books that he had his disciples paint, were windows into the spiritual world. He called them windows in the spiritual world. And that's what I looked into the book, and I saw one painting after another painting. So I wanted to know what God does. And here his pastimes were painted. There was pictures. Windows I could look in and see. So it was very, actually, as soon as I got that book, I was crying because I was already on my knees. I pulled the book down and I knew I had found what I had been looking for. And it didn't feel like it was just a couple years that I was looking. It felt like it was 2,000 lifetimes. I felt like I've been looking for so long for this, and I finally found it. And so I knew whoever wrote this book, he is my spiritual master. The original Krishna book, if you've ever seen the Radha Krishna Temple album, has a picture of Prabhupada sitting and smiling, grinning ear to ear, and the next printing they put a different painting, a picture of Prabhupada, but that original one was that picture. So when I turned the book over to see if it had anything about the author, it had the picture of Srila Prabhupada, and my first thought was, how could such a small child write this big book? Prabhupada's grinning smile. I just thought he was a small child. And that's what struck me. And then I thought, oh, it's a small child in an old man's body. And that just made sense to me. And I wished I could have told that story to Prabhupada. I never told devotees how I found the books. I found his books because for a long time, because it was 3 years after that because I didn't know there was a temple. I didn't know where temples were. I just got that Krishna book in the library. And actually, and I looked up, and there were two other books. So they had 3 of Prabhupada's books: Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and the Nectar of Devotion, and the Krishna books. So anyway, I never thought about telling anyone. 3 years later, when I joined the temple, actually, let me just explain, since I've already started this. I took those 3 books up to the counter to check them out. And when I set them down on the counter, the librarian just asked me, how did you get those 3 books? And I thought, well, I'll tell her, that they weren't computers then, but there was in the libraries, the library system had a computer, and they'd do a printout of all the books by author. And so I looked up in their little pamphlet about all the books that Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote, and I found this whole list. And then I went to the card catalog and found the library had 3 of them. So I took checked those 3 books. I was going to tell her that, but then she said, I just put those books out. They're on 3 different aisles. I know you couldn't have found them by accident. How did you get those 3 books? I just put them out. So I told her the truth. I said, well, I was praying to God. I wanted these books. And so he sent them. And then she said, just yesterday, a man came in with a shaved head and a ponytail, wearing white flowing robes. This is America. Nobody's ever seen people in dhoti, She said he came in with white flowing robes, and a girl was with him with colorful flowing robes. And he put those same 3 books down right on the same spot, right on this counter. And he said, here, God wants you to have these books. And so she asked me, do you know who he was? Well, I had been praying to God to send me a book for my guru, who would tell me what God looks like. So I didn't know, but white flowing robes, I'd never seen anybody wearing white flowing robes. I just said he was an angel. God sent his angel to bring these books. That was what I thought. I mean, where else do you see men in white flowing robes? And anyway, so her knees buckled. She almost fell. She had to grab the counter to keep from falling. And after that, her hands were shaking, and she was stamping the books, and I checked them out, but she never said anything after that. So I never told anybody until I joined, like I said, he said in 73. That was 70 when I found the books. And when I joined, Jayatirtha was my temple president. And later he became GBC. And he became one of the 11 Ritviks. But So in 1982, I was now in Detroit with the Fate Project. I'll just move this closer. I was now in Detroit with the Fate Project and the diorama exhibits. Like, there's dioramas back here. And so he was GBC there, and we were just talking in his room, and he just asked me one time how I came to the Krishna consciousness. And I told him, I found Prabhupada's books in the library. He said, what library? I said, West Covina. It's in Southern California. And he just perked up. Normally, he was busy. He doesn't have much time to talk, but he wanted to hear the whole thing. So I told him the whole story. And when I got to the part of the person who brought the books in, and librarian asked who is that? And I said, well, that was one of God's angels. He sent these books for me. So then Jayatirath said, that was him. He brought those books. Krishna book had just come out in the summer of 1970. It was, in the Krishna book, Prabhupada wrote the introduction in March of 1970. So then it went to the printers. So it had just come back from the printers. It had just come out, and it was a hardbound book. And I'm talking about volume 1 of the 2-volume set. They only had the volume 1 then. And the Nectar Devotion had come out, and the Teaching of Lord Chaitanya came out previously, and then the Nectar Devotion. They're all hardbound books. And the devotees didn't know how to distribute hardbound books at that time. They hadn't. So they were just sitting there. They didn't know how to get them out. So he thought, he does spiritual sky incense. He's going to take care of a store in West Covina, and he could see a library right from that store. And he thought, I'll just take them and see if the library will take them. And on the way there, he was thinking, what can you never distribute in the library before? So he just thought, I'll just come in and say, here, God wants you to have these. So anyway, that was the story. The first person I told was the person involved with it. And Krishna, Jasya Prasadad Bhagavat Prasado. That by the mercy of Krishna, one gets the Guru. And by the mercy of Guru, one gets Krishna. So I was praying to Krishna, please send me my spiritual master, so he would tell me everything about you. So that's what I was praying for. I actually lived that, experienced that when I came. So I was praying to God, and then because I wanted to know about him. And by then I realized I needed a Guru. So Prabhupada came in the form of his book to the library. And that he was still living in his Bapu form here, but I found him through his books in the library. And his books are still here, and he's still accessible the same way. His teachings are here. His classes are recorded. And that's, I was even thinking he was probably already gone. I was looking for someone who lived a long time ago. And I wanted to, and that he had written this book. So that is still valid. The Guru the spiritual master is a master. He's a teacher. And the most important aspect of the Guru is his Vani, his teachings. And Srila Prabhupada lives eternally in his books, and his followers live with him. This is the understanding. So anyway, that's how I came to Krishna consciousness. So on this Guru issue, because when Srila Prabhupada was here, it was simple. Srila Prabhupada was the one Guru for his mission, ISKCON. And there was no question. But after he left, I was looking very keenly, as all of us were, what is the GBC going to do? Now that Prabhupada is gone, the GBC are our leaders now. So what are they going to do? I was keenly wanting to know, how is things going to work? How it will work without Prabhupada here? Because we had all given our life to Srila Prabhupada and his mission. And it was our life. So we're all invested. What I mean is, sometimes the leaders were like thinking that it was just their mission and we were just, but it was our mission. It was Prabhupada's. We were all dedicated ourselves to Srila Prabhupada. Anyway, just before Prabhupada left, while he was still the last month, I mean, we heard that Prabhupada was very ill. But we never really heard for a long time that Prabhupada said he was leaving soon. That the GBC heard there in Vrindavan. But I was in Los Angeles. That was the world headquarters. And I don't recall that we ever really heard that Prabhupada said he was leaving soon. But we just knew that he was very ill. And he had been ill before. And he always recovered. And we just couldn't imagine he would actually leave. So, and then we started hearing the stories by September. Prabhupada was going to come. He made it to England, but he was too ill and had to go back. Then it started to set in that Prabhupada he's leaving. He's not going to be here much longer. So Bhardraj was in charge of the diorama project. He joined in 67 or 8. He was a senior devotee. So, and he was an artist. He painted the cover of the Macmillan Gita with Krishna Arjuna, but he painted many of the paintings in the Gita. Almost what he didn't paint, he did the drawings for. Another artist painted. He was their leading artist. And Prabhupada sent him to learn this dioramas exhibits. So he went to, he decided he's going to go to Prabhupada. In October, he went to go see Prabhupada. After he left, I thought, no, I've got to go too. I've got to be with Prabhupada. I need to be with him when he leaves this world. I want to see him one last time. I want to be in his association. Prabhupada's, the glance of the pure devotee is all merciful. It's all compassionate. I wanted that glance one more time. I wanted to see Srila Prabhupada. I wanted to have his mercy one more time. So I never left the U.S. before. I had to see about passport, visa, all these things that, it was a lot. But I was only like 1 or 2 days started to do it. And then Rameshwar came. He was our JBC in Los Angeles. And he said he had an important message from Prabhupada. He's having an Istagosti. He came and he told us, Prabhupada said not to go to see him. The Prabhupada doesn't want us to go see him. To go with him, to leave our service. He wants us to stay and do our service. And I couldn't believe it because Prabhupada's our spiritual father. And what father wouldn't want to see his children again before he leaves? And I wanted to see my spiritual father. So I couldn't understand, why would Srila Prabhupada not want us to come? But he made it very clear. This came from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada sent him with a message, and this was the message. He doesn't want us to come. So I was actually, when he said that, and then later that day, I started crying because I realized I'll never see Prabhupada again. If I don't go, I'll never be able to see him if he's leaving. And that's what we started to realize by then. It was Prabhupada's final days. So then Satsvarup came, another JBC, and he said the same thing. The Prabhupada said not to come. So when Prabhupada actually left this world, then after about a week or 10 days afterwards, Bhardraj came back from India, and he was telling us these Prabhupada's last days. Okay? He was telling us about Prabhupada's last days, and one of the things he said was that he was in the room and Prabhupada said, I want all of my disciples to come. And we were like, what? Bhardraj? And I was thinking, why is Bhardraj making up some story, then I was realizing, I don't think he's lying. Why would he say something like that? He didn't know that we had been told just the opposite. So that next morning, Rameshwar gave class. After the class, I caught up with him and I asked him, I said, Bhardraj just told us that, because Bhardraj said, Prabhupada asked the one day And a week later, Prabhupada had been taking rest for some time, and he woke up and he looked around and he saw only 3 devotees in his room: Bhardraj, Hamsadutta, and Upendra. Upendra or Uttama Sloka? Oh, I get them mixed up. I think it was Uttama Sloka. Anyway, the 3 people were there. And so Prabhupada looked around and he said, "Why are my disciples avoiding me? Why haven't they come?" And Bhardraj was explaining that Prabhupada was practically in tears. He was so hurt by that everyone hadn't come yet. And so I went to Rameshwar and I asked. So Bhardraj told us, Prabhupada asked us to come, and you came here and said Prabhupada told us not to come. So he took me to his room, and then he explained everything. He said, this is the way he talked. He said, "Ameyatma, I saved ISKCON." And then as he was describing everything, what I realized he was telling me was he thought he was saving ISKCON from Srila Prabhupada. That Srila Prabhupada had made this request for everyone to come, and he thought that would destroy ISKCON if all the devotees left their services and they all went. Anyway, it was a long story, but it was 5 months, he was explaining. Prabhupada announced he was leaving in May, and it was 5 months later that in October, by October, the Prabhupada had asked for everyone to come, and so he was saying, who knew how much longer Prabhupada would go on for, and if all the devotees came, the book distributors, the ones who were collecting the donations for the temples would all come, and at that time all the temples had mortgages. So he said, if all the devotees came, the temples would be foreclosed by the banks, there wouldn't be any more temples left, and ISKCON would be finished. So that was his logic. So when he heard that Prabhupada gave that request, he said, I knew I had to do something to keep the devotees from hearing what Prabhupada had asked. And I'm thinking that's the duty of the disciple, is to fulfill the order of the spiritual master, to carry out his request, not to keep devotees from knowing and stopping the request. And I sat there, I was like numb, because I didn't know, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know all these things he was telling me. I thought, how could a disciple do that? And then he said, he went and explained the whole thing in detail. So I'm kind of going on this a long time. But ultimately, then he told me that he really wasn't lying, when he told us that. His reasoning was, he said, that the ones who distribute Prabhupada's books, they get the most mercy from Lord Chaitanya. So he said, and I am now the director of the BBT, so all the books, they are coming through him. So he was claiming credit for all the books being distributed. So he said, Lord Chaitanya has given me special mercy that I can understand Prabhupada's inner desires. And so he said, and Prabhupada's inner desire was he didn't want his temples to be lost. And so he said, even though Prabhupada requested everyone to come, he really didn't want anybody to come. This was what does Prabhupada call it? The over-intelligence? So Lord Chaitanya gave him that mercy to understand Prabhupada's inner desire, but somehow Lord Chaitanya didn't give Prabhupada that mercy. The Prabhupada didn't understand what he really wanted. Prabhupada externally asked for everybody to come, but he really didn't want anybody to come. This is like twisted logic. Anyway, this is what he actually told me. So after that, I thought, he told me that when he came up with this idea of coming back, because in India at that time, and in Vrindavan, you couldn't make phone calls very easily, international calls. Even to send a telegram, they had to go to Mathura. And so it was decided, he decided he would come back to America, the headquarters in Los Angeles, from these BBT office. He could call all the temples around the world and to inform everyone not to come, and which is what he did. So, what was I going to say? Forgot my train of thought there for a second.
So finally, you came to.
Well, anyway, so he told me, so after he came up with this plan, he went to, instead of going to Srila Prabhupada and say, I have this concern, Srila Prabhupada. I'm concerned that if all the devotees come, it's going to hurt your movement. Instead, he did go to Tamal, and Tamal was the gatekeeper of Srila Prabhupada. But Tamal decided that Rameshwar's plan was good. He approved of it. He said all the other GBC have to be informed, so that they didn't go to Srila Prabhupada. They just made that decision on their own. And so Satsvarup I knew was involved, Tamal was involved, Rameshwar was involved. So when I came out of that meeting with Rameshwar, I thought, they just lied to all of us on Prabhupada's name. They used Prabhupada's name to lie to us, to thwart Srila Prabhupada's personal request, his last personal request. Instead of trying to fulfill the spiritual master's request, they were determined to stop it. And I thought, what else have they lied to us about that Prabhupada had said? And what else will they lie to us in the future? How can we trust people like that? How can you trust a leader like that? And so I thought, these men are no longer qualified to be GBC. They should be replaced as GBC. But then a few weeks later, we started hearing that Prabhupada had given a list of the next acharyas in our line. And these men were on that list. And I thought, how? That's not, a lot of us knew these men were not qualified. They were not pure devotees. And personal dealings with Rameshwar, with these God brothers, he didn't have, good Vaishnav behavior. Maybe in the public it could appear nice, but dealing with him in direct dealings in his room, he didn't have Vaishnav behavior. He wasn't a pure devotee. Tamal Krishna was known as, you want to know what we called him? Everybody called him. He knew what we called him, hot tamale. Now, there's a Spanish food called tamales, and they make it very hot and spicy. So everybody called him the hot tamale. But he was known as being somewhat aggressive and, trying to keep control of everyone. And so how could these people how could Srila Prabhupada, how could Krishna have allowed Prabhupada to name these people as the next gurus in our disciplic line of Lord Chaitanya's mission? This is our disciplic line. And how could these men, I myself, so many of my godbrothers just couldn't accept this, but it was the only thing the GBC told us. And I'm going on for a long time. I'm supposed to ask questions, aren't I? So what time have we finished? 12:30. Okay, so I'll end this part up pretty quick. I didn't get to the Ridvik issue yet, but at the beginning we didn't really accept these men were qualified, but we had nothing else to go by. We had no other access to any other information. And after a while, we just had to accept it. Those who didn't, they got kicked out of ISKCON. If they spoke up, they were out. So it's a long story. I made a long story out of this, but ultimately, years later, as I started researching this, and I found, they kept the July 9th letter away from us also. We didn't have access to it. We didn't know what Prabhupada wrote there. They just told us that it was a list of gurus. The Prabhupada made a list of gurus. They did write one time in 1978 that it was Prabhupada had selected them as Ritviks to initiate on his behalf while he was present, and on his disappearance, they will become regular gurus. And they said it said that within the list that Prabhupada gave. So, and it doesn't say that. So we didn't have access to any of that until around it started around 85, 86. by 87, just a handful of devotees were getting, because of Sulochan, got access to the letters, and then he found that July 9th letter and started making copies and sharing it. So it took a long time, and that's why it wasn't, no one talked about Ritvik at the beginning, because no one knew that's what Prabhupada wanted. I'll just finish up and then I'll ask questions, but what the GBC did on the May 28th meeting, they asked Prabhupada a couple of questions about the initiations. And the nature of those questions only makes sense if Prabhupada has discussed Ritvik before that meeting, because the only two questions they had written down before the meeting was, how are initiations to be conducted in the future when you're no longer present with us? Not who will conduct the initiations, not who will be the guru, just how to conduct initiations. Why would that be their number one question? Unless they knew Srila Prabhupada had a system set up where he would remain the guru. And they were just wanting to know the details of how it's going to function. Because they knew how initiations are to be conducted. They were helping Prabhupada for many years. I mean, helping by meaning Prabhupada had delegated many aspects. They were chanting on beads and giving the names, and the temple presidents who were assessing the new members, who's qualified, and giving the recommendations, so that they knew the process. And then their second question is that they wrote down before the meeting. They didn't ask the full question because Prabhupada interrupted, but their full question written down was, what is the relationship of the one who gives this initiation and the one who's being initiated? It was an odd question if they were thinking there would be a regular guru. The person who gives the initiation is the guru, but they meant to be asking, what is the relationship of the priest who performs this ceremony? But they asked it as, what is the relation of the one who gives this initiation, the one who's being initiated? And they even admit, some of them have admitted that question would have been about Ritviks, but they admit that, but some of them didn't realize that was written down before the meeting. So yes, during that meeting, there were two aspects of that meeting. Prabhupada answering their questions, saying he would soon select Ritviks. And then the second part of that conversation was when Prabhupada said, on my order, be actual guru. Be an actual guru by his order, but by my order, he said. So then they were asking, well, whose disciples were him? His disciples. He was initiating. So who was he answering about? He was answering about the one he will give his order to. They thought he was answering about the Ritviks that he would soon name. So they got confused. There were two aspects Prabhupada was giving. And then Prabhupada explained at the end, when they were ready to go to the next topic, Prabhupada said, to clarify what he was saying, he said, when I order, you become guru. He becomes regular guru, disciple of my disciple. He didn't say, when I recommend these men to become Ritviks, on my disappearance, they will become regular guru. He didn't clarify that. He didn't say on my disappearance. He said, on my order, when I order, you become guru. He becomes a regular guru. And I also noticed when he talked about giving his order, he talked in singularity. When he talked about the Ritviks, it was plural. When he talked about his giving his order, he will become regular guru. But the GBC wrote down the minutes of that meeting, became the official GBC record of what Prabhupada said. And they wrote down, when he was asked about initiations in the future, when he's no longer present, Prabhupada said he would soon select men who will initiate their own disciples on Prabhupada's disappearance. I mean, they wrote a little bit different wording, but that's the main. So Prabhupada never used the word on disappearance, on his order, but by his order, when I order. 3 times he said it was by his order. And not, but they wrote it down wrong. And that became the basis of the GBC's system for their guru system. They didn't reference the actual recording because that recording was done on a reel-to-reel. They didn't make copies. It was sent off to Los Angeles. It wasn't a lecture. It's set on the shelves. So all they had to go by was that faulty and misleading GBC minutes of that meeting. So when the July 9th letter came, at first they thought, oh, these are Ritviks. And Rameshwar wrote letters to the GBC. This is the letter. He sent the letter out to the GBC. That they were just Ritviks on Prabhupada's behalf. But later then they started thinking, wait a minute. Prabhupada said he was going to give a list of men who will be regular gurus. These are the gurus on Prabhupada's disappearance. They're going to be gurus. It doesn't say that in the letter. Prabhupada didn't say that on May 28th. The GBC's flawed report said that. And that's what they based it all on. So I'll end there and ask for questions. Yeah. And I do have not only bad hearing, but I have a hard time with accent. So I may ask a few times.
Sure. So, May 28th conversation. The 7 devotees were there inside the room. 7 GBC members.
Uh-huh.
Out of 80 GBC members, 7 GBC members were there inside Prabhupada's room in that conversation.
Oh, at the time, at the meeting.
At that time. So all 7 misunderstood and came out, made the minutes.
Yeah, there were, in one place it says there were 6 or 7 GBC. Another, but on the tape, you can hear other devotees there. But yeah, not all the GBC were in that. But you asked about the tape. What was it? What did you ask?
They all misunderstood what Prabhupada said because minutes.
They all wrote down 18 of the GBC. There were 20. I think there were 22 at that time. And then Prabhupada gave another couple before he passed. So there were 22 GBC at that time. 19 were in Vrindavan that I could figure out at that time, and 18 of them signed on the paper. The only one that didn't sign was Tamal, but he was there. He was asking questions. So I just say, I just speculate. Maybe he was just too busy because he's Prabhupada's personal servant and secretary. But yeah, they all signed off on it. And that's why they thought this is what Prabhupada wanted. The other members who were there, and I've had some conversation with some were there, and they agreed that they thought that's what Prabhupada was saying. But when you listen to the tape, and I had a hard time. I actually had myself some question about that, because it seems like Prabhupada was giving both sides. You could argue both sides. Prabhupada saying he will select Ritviks, but then he was saying, when Tamal asked the question, he said, these Ritviks, they're officiating. They're giving initiation. Whose disciples will they be? So he mentions Ritvik, he mentions officiating, but then he says they're giving initiation. Well, which is it? Because Ritviks don't give the initiation, they perform the ceremony. But Prabhupada had already set the tone that he was now talking about those who he gives his order to. And Prabhupada is answering about those who he gives his order to. So he could give his order to a Ritvik. Just because Tamal mentioned Ritvik doesn't mean Prabhupada couldn't have given his order to a Ritvik. So that doesn't mean Prabhupada was answering about those he would soon name. He was answering about who he would give. And he confirmed that when I order you become guru, he becomes regular guru. So he confirmed that's what he was talking about.
So my question is the premeditated that they wanted to become guru, that's how the way they took away?
Well, yeah. So Satsvarup, as far as I can tell, it was Satsvarup who wrote the minutes, because he was JBC's secretary at the time. That was his duty to, take care of the minutes of the meetings. But he was there speaking, asking the question. So he wasn't writing any notes down while Prabhupada was speaking. After the meeting, he came out and then he wrote down what he thought from memory, what Prabhupada had said. So what would influence? And that's I have to admit, it's a speculation, but that's my speculation, that they were, it's not just speculation. Tamal admits that they had that desire, that strong desire to want to become guru, and so why they only heard what they wanted to hear. When Prabhupada said, on my order, but by my order, when I ordered, they wrote down on disappearance. And how could you do that? How could you not, when Prabhupada said it 3 times and they wrote it down differently, I don't think, one could say, well, Satsvarupa wanted to be guru and he was purposefully doing that. But I don't think that was the case. I think they just misunderstood. But because of that strong desire to want to become a guru, they only heard what they wanted to hear and they wrote it down. And because Satsvarup had explained this right after that to Jayadvaita. And Jayadvaita was not a GBC. He was, senior devotee. He was a sannyasi, but he wasn't a GBC. And he said, well, okay, I accept that Prabhupada may have said that, but other devotees might not. So can we get it done in writing? Can we go to Prabhupada and ask him to sign that this is what he said? So they went to Tamal, and Tamal said, I understood it, and that's good enough. And he didn't allow the devotees, Satsvarup, who was another senior devotee, GBC, to go in and have Prabhupada sign. So, any other questions?
No, I think that May 28th conversations, that minutes of meeting, if they could have presented to Prabhupada, they would have presented to Prabhupada for signature.
Yeah, that's what they were.
That would have been, that missing that point, it created biggest confusion.
Yeah, that's what I just said. When Satsvarup explained to Jayadvaita, that was that minutes of the meeting, and he said, I accept it, but a lot of devotees might not, so we need to get it in writing. And
Additionally, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he forbid not to go to Prabhupada and take the signature.
I'm sorry.
Intentionally, Tamal Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah, Tamal was a... Well, I was going to say he's a shady character, but anyway, he was. I never served under him, but I had experience, and that he was very aggressive. He wanted to take over ISKCON. I had that direct experience because I won't go into the whole story, but I was. With the Fate Project, and Karundar was a GBC, and he fell down, he came back, and now we were sharing an office together. And Tamal came in and wanted to have Karundar join him. He said, if we did this, Prabhupada will just turn ISKCON over to us. So he was very aggressive. He wanted to take over ISKCON. While Prabhupada was here, he wanted to take over. So we don't know Tamal, but Tamal flipped and flopped. Because on 1980, he admitted that Prabhupada had talked about Ritvik before, and then they came back and that Prabhupada only ever selected Ritviks. He admitted that in a talk. When the GBC had not expelled, but had taken away his guru title because he had a fall down, and so they told him he could no longer take disciples, and I think they removed him off the GBC as well. But the main thing was that he was telling even Prabhupada disciples that now they could not go back to Krishna without going through him. The Prabhupada was insufficient. Now he's the new Acharya. They have to go through him.
He even made a comment that all the disciples Prabhupada re-initiated.
No, not that way, but that in other words, in his zone, no one could go back to Krishna except through him. Even Prabhupada's disciples, they still had to accept and surrender to him. So that's why the GBC said, they understood that was offensive. But, he admitted in 1980 that he wanted the control. He wanted that to control everything. In my book, I asked all of the devotees I could get a hold of, who were involved with that GBC meeting where they came up with the list of the 2 questions, and one of them was Guru Kripa, and he was saying that Tamal was very manipulative. He was Prabhupada's secretary, and he was very manipulative with even the GBC and other members. I don't want to dwell too much on that because that gets a personal attack. I really wanted to just focus on the facts, but that is part of a fact, but it shouldn't be held as a main thing. That's because it becomes a personal attack on someone, but it's something to consider, but it's not the main understanding. They were motivated. And so they only wanted to hear what they wanted to hear. But that's the thing, is there's no record, there's no audio, there's nothing in writing where Srila Prabhupada said these 11 men will become gurus, are to become the spiritual masters. There's nothing in writing, no verbal, direct, explicit, where Prabhupada said this. The other thing is the GBC ordaining new gurus. There is nothing by Prabhupada where he ever said these men, I authorize the GBC to create or ordain or authorize gurus or regulate them. This is...
But what about the after 11? After 11 that this Prabhupada chose.
So that what they said was, in the very first paper in 1978, that Prabhupada said that these are the first 11 gurus, and that they can add to select more. Of course, they wrote in that paper that the gurus will select the other additional gurus, that the existing 11 will select the other additional gurus. But where they got that from is after Prabhupada signed the July 9th letter, and we call it July 9th letter. The name for that came later. Prabhupada referred to it as the list. The devotees often referred to it as the list because it was a list of 11 names of the Ritviks. But after he signed the letter, Tamal said that Prabhupada told him the GBC can add to this list. And Tamal went immediately with that letter and shared it with the other GBC members who was in Vrindavan at the time, and told them that right away, that Prabhupada said that they can add to that list. So that's become acceptable, even though it's not recorded that we know of. Although Gauridas Pandit said he recorded all those meetings. We don't have the tape. But that's where they came up with the idea that Prabhupada said they could add to that list. And they say that is a list of gurus. The letter itself mentions nothing about these men becoming gurus. It's a list of Ritvik representatives. So Prabhupada said they could add to the list of Ritviks. That's logical. That's understandable. But it's the GBC who then say that it's a list of gurus. And so everything they base their system on is speculation. There's nothing solid. When you actually investigate it, where did Prabhupada say these are to be 11 gurus? They can't come up with anything solid, explicit. Here it is, black and white, clear as it's twisting. And where did Prabhupada say GBC is authorized to ordain new gurus? It's twisting, it's bending things. It's nothing straight, direct. Here it is. Where did Prabhupada say? I will just make one point here. May 28th, they asked the question, how are the initiations to be conducted in the future, particularly when you're no longer present with us? I will soon recommend some, after this is settled up. This is pointing, it's just adjective. It points to something that was already discussed. It doesn't point to something outside of the discussion. So what was just asked, how are the initiations to be conducted? After this is settled, because Prabhupada hadn't settled how the details, the initiations would be conducted when he's no longer present. So he said, after this is settled up, I shall recommend some of you to act as officiating acharyas. What's that? It's no definition anywhere in the rest of the Veda base. Tamal asked, is that a Ritvik acharya? Prabhupada said, Ritvik, yes. He didn't say acharya, yes. Ritvik, yes. So then Prabhupada would soon select Ritviks. That was the answer to how initiations would be conducted in the future. In that whole rest of the conversation, Prabhupada never answered how the initiations are to be conducted. He just said, after it's settled, I'll select Ritviks. 5.5 weeks later, Prabhupada selects 11 Ritviks in a letter that he dictated that his research shows that there was at least 4 or 5 meetings to craft that one short letter. The Prabhupada made sure that that very short letter stated what he really wanted to state. Generally, Prabhupada dictates the letter one time, it's typed up, given to Prabhupada, he signs, done. This Tamal kept going in and with meetings. So, and that letter is a list of Ritviks, and it refers back to the May 28th meeting when the GBC met recently in Vrindavan, and wherein Prabhupada said he would soon select the Ritviks. So it's a straight line. Prabhupada said he would soon select Ritviks. He gives the list of Ritviks. In that list, he refers back to that question, and that answer, and the question that he was answering is how the initiation will be done in the future, when he's no longer present. So we have that straight line of evidence. It's done in writing with a signature, everything. What do the GBC have? That's twisting and bending Prabhupada's words. It doesn't exist. There's no direct, explicit, nothing given. Okay.
What was that? This is settled up.
I'm sorry.
This is settled up. What is that Prabhupada talking about? This is after this is settled up.
After this is settled.
What is the context of it?
Well, because the only thing that was asked is how to conduct the initiations in the future when he's no longer present. These initiations, it's a different than the regular. The GBC knew how to conduct a regular initiation, the physical aspects of it, you know. So what Prabhupada was saying, that he hadn't decided the exact format of how they were to be conducted. In the July 9th letter, he gives the list of Ritviks, and he explains how the initiation is to be conducted. The temple presidents used to send the letter to him, a recommendation letter for the new disciples. Now they're to send it to the nearest Ritvik. They will select the names, they will chant on the beads, and they will inform the temple president, this is now they're now Prabhupada's disciples. So that then Prabhupada explained how the initiation is to be conducted. So he answered that question in the letter. That's when he settled it, the details.
Many times, this doubt comes in devotees' minds that these 11 people, at least some of them, had already showed some kind of tendencies to become gurus.
Had showed some
tendencies to become gurus. In fact, then Kirtananda Maharaj became guru. Then Prabhupada has to chastise him and he has to take him off from service. So why Prabhupada mentioned these people names as Ritviks by knowing that they have that guru tendencies becoming guru?
That's a good question, and as Tamal himself admitted, also Hamsadutta admitted, they were very aggressive. They were also in charge, they were GBC. They wanted to have big position. So, one hand, possibly Srila Prabhupada selected them because he knew they would want some position. But it's not really a position. Ritvik is not really a position. The GBC is a position. It has authority. Ritvik is just, you send the letter to the nearest Ritvik, and why Ritvik? Because the Ritvik is one who performs the ceremony, the Vedic ceremonies. So Prabhupada delegated these things. So I don't know the exact answer why Prabhupada selected them particularly, but they were also serving him as GBC members, as leaders of the mission. When he selected the Ritviks, he was only selecting from GBC members. And he selected them by their location, where they were located, not by their qualification. He needed someone in Europe. Then Bhagawan and Rishikesh, and so he was selecting in South America. Hridayananda, and we need some from India. Oh, Jaipataka, so that he was selecting by location, not by qualification, because all they were to do is to have different Ritviks in different places of the planet. They were GBC, they were serving him anyway. It wasn't any unique, special quality. They were just to take the recommendations and accept them on Prabhupada's behalf. Prabhupada had delegated, nobody else we know of, no past acharya has ever delegated such things for initiations, even while they were living. Where Prabhupada had delegated the whole physical aspects of initiation. He was the guru giving the spiritual shelter, but he was no longer involved in any of the physical aspects at all. We don't know of any past acharya who actually delegated all these things for his disciples to do on his behalf. Prabhupada did. It is unique. But they say, because of that, the GBC doesn't accept, but they accepted it when Prabhupada was physically here. They said, it was only bona fide while Prabhupada was present. But even that system, even while Prabhupada was present, no past acharya ever did that when they were living in this world either. So it was a unique system that Prabhupada set up.
So what I understood is not by qualification, but by location.
By location, yeah.
The Bhavananda, he was proven pedophile. So Bhavananda, name is there in that.
Uh-huh.
He was neither GVC nor temple president.
Yeah,
He was almost. So such names were also.
He added his name because my understanding, well, now actually, I don't know if this took place before then or after. I know he added his GBC. I can't remember now exactly, but I do know at one point Bhavananda was in Mayapur and there was dacoits came they wanted to attack Srila Prabhupada. They thought Prabhupada was there. And he came out and addressed, to stop them, and and because of that, Prabhupada, Bhavananda did. He stood up to them. They were coming to kill Prabhupada. They came to attack Prabhupada. They were riled up by the communists, in Bengal. So because of that, Prabhupada made him GBC, and I think it had to do with that, but I'll have to check that. I can't remember the sequence. Yeah, he was the only non-GBC, but I think it was because of that reason.
So, like July 9th letter says that henceforward the recommendation letters should be sent to the Ritviks. But before that they were coming to Srila Prabhupada. But we have read that even before July 9th letter, there were devotees who were chanting on beads and giving. So how that communication would go to them that time?
So how what?
The communication that these are the names who are to be given or who are to be given beads. Like letters are coming to Srila Prabhupada.
You mean before the July 9th letter?
Yes.
Yeah, well, before the July 9th letter, still Srila Prabhupada was involved in every initiation. Still, they would send the letters to Prabhupada, and then he would decide if he was going to chant on the beads or he would delegate it, and who he would delegate it to. So Prabhupada still made those decisions himself directly. I don't know of any, where Prabhupada had delegated to make those decisions before that. That was the unique feature of the July 9th letter, that Prabhupada had now set up a formal, and everything was actually formally delegated. Which was an argument by Jayadvaita that if Prabhupada really wanted this, he would have talked for days, for months and months, with all the GBC members, not, that this is what he wanted, because it was such a unique thing. My point is that the whole Ritvik process was a gradual process from 1969, when Prabhupada started the temple presidents to assess the new disciples. That is written that the guru is supposed to assess the disciple to see if he's qualified. And Prabhupada started delegating that because he was traveling. He wasn't there at any one temple long enough to make that assessment himself. So he delegated that to the temple presidents. And then by 1970, when he made GBC, he was slowly giving them more and more. By 72 or 3, some were chanting on beads, giving names. So he was delegating, but not official, not like from now on you do this. It was just per initiation. You know, he might ask Kirtananda because the devotees were in that, part of the country. He might ask, Karandar because he was on the West Coast. He might ask Kirtananda because he's in South America. But it wasn't a formal setup. And from now on, this is the system. Each time Prabhupada was involved.
Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
If from 1969 Prabhupada had formally, organically started the way of initiation, why he couldn't have mentioned the person who was doing that ceremony in this tyranny itself?
Why didn't he mention what?
Why didn't he name that person who does the ceremony as earthquake during that time itself?
Yeah. We don't remember Prabhupada using that term at that time, but at my initiation, I should say one other thing, that in 1970, he made the tape recording of chanting the Gayatri to be played back in the ear of devotees when they took Brahman initiation. So he made that as far as 1970, at least 1970 that I found, that he mentions it. And he said he was telling the devotee, if you can't find the tape, then you chant in the ear. So he delegated all that. But I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Naming that person.
Oh, so why didn't he use the word Ritvik?
It would have been common terminology even before 1970s.
Yeah, I just know from my personal experience when I was given 1973 at my first initiation. Prabhupada was there in Los Angeles. He handed me the beads and all that. He was on the Vyasa, but Pradyumna did the fire yagna. And so before the initiation, Karandar was our GBC. Karandar was explaining to us what the process would be, because myself and a number of other devotees hadn't even been present in a fire yagna before, and we hadn't seen. So he was telling us how things would be set up and things. And one devotee was getting Brahman initiation for his second initiation. And Karandar was explaining, for this initiation, Pradyumna will be performing the fire yagna. He'll be chanting the mantras and not Prabhupada. And that devotee said, no, I don't want to become Pradyumna's, I don't want him to be my guru for Brahman initiation. I want Prabhupada to be my Brahman. And so Pradyumna was walking by. And so Karandar asked Pradyumna to explain how, he's performing the fire unit, but Prabhupada is the actual guru. And I remember, it was even though I was just a new devotee, but I remember him using the word Ritvik, saying that he was the Ritvik priest, that he was just doing this on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. He'll perform the fire yagna, he'll chant the mantras, but Prabhupada was the actual one giving the initiation. That's the first time I heard that, and then I didn't hear it again until, much later. But Prabhupada didn't use the term that we know of. I mean, he does have it in his books. He does have it in his purports. And he does explain what the Ritvik is. It's a bona fide, authorized priest who can perform ceremonies. But no, he did not give any formal title to any of those he had told to give chant on the beads. It was like I said, it was on a per initiation basis that Prabhupada would ask devotees, you chant on the beads. And there's different GBCs. He never gave a formal title or made any. Karandar had given the names for the initiation before my initiation and at my initiation for all the devotees. And Karandar told me that because the only one that Prabhupada didn't accept was my name. Because Prabhupada looked at my beads, and Karandar didn't know, I didn't even tell him, but I had written on my beads, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, and Jaya Prabhupada, and I had written on pen, and it's still on my beads. So he said that Prabhupada was just looking at my beads. Karandar had selected Janardhan, and he had put a tag on the beads, and he'd say, oh, Prabhupada, this devotee, his name will be Janardhan, and things like that. He was saying what the process was. He went up to Prabhupada's room with the whole number of beads. He would hand Prabhupada one, and he would take another bead. And he would chant on one bead, and Prabhupada would be chanting on the other bead, and then to the next one. So he went to hand my bead to Prabhupada and said, his name will be Janardhan. And Prabhupada looked at my bead and said, no, his name will be Ameyatma. So Karandar had told me that 2 years later because he wanted me to know that I was the only one that Prabhupada didn't accept the name. So no, he didn't give any title. He didn't give any formal, now you are a Ritvik and you are doing this. He would, next time he would have, Kirtanananda do or so, Harinanda or someone else. So, but my point with that is that Jayadvaita had said that Prabhupada would have spoken for months and months on this. My point is that when Prabhupada had devotees delegating these different aspects, he never explained anything. He never said, I am doing this because, I am authorized to do this because, and give a whole explanation. This was never done before, but I am doing it. It's unique. He never mentioned anything like that. Where do we have the experience of the past acharyas delegating these things to their disciples to do on their behalf? But Prabhupada was doing it, and nobody questioned it. When Prabhupada did it, we just accept it. When Prabhupada is, asking someone to chant in the ear or playing a tape, we just accept it. The Gayatri mantra, we didn't think, this has never been done before, and you're not authorized to do this, are you, Prabhupada? We never questioned it, and Prabhupada never gave a long explanation. So, my point is, why would he have to give a long explanation at the very last thing of just finalizing it?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The opposite camp, they quote some references of Prabhupada letters, like to claim this, that letter to Dushta Krishna and the letter to Brahmananda. One or two references where Prabhupada directly writes in the letter, you can accept disciples. So were there any special circumstances where Prabhupada had to write like that?
Yeah, and I can't remember that exact letter. I have a video I just made on that, but Prabhupada also says something to the point of to become leader, you have to be following, In other words, if you're following the spiritual master, then you can become leader. You have to be, I think he mentioned something about being trained in that as well. But the point is that every time he made a statement like that in the future you can become guru and take your own disciples, he always gave a criteria to it, that they have to be actually qualified first. The whole quote, because Amoga Lila made a video and he just mentioned part of that quote. But the whole quote was, Prabhupada was saying, that if he's qualified, he can become guru and make disciples. He was just giving him, it wasn't an order. And the other thing is that there are many times that Prabhupada had said that he wanted us to become guru and take our own disciples after he leaves. There are many times he said this. And Hamsadutta, he wrote the letter saying that he wanted the Bhakti Shastra courses and the Bhakti Vaibhava and Bhakti Vedanta, and those who get Bhakti Vedanta, they can initiate their own disciples. And he said, by 1975, all my disciples, he wrote that in 1969, said can become guru and accept their own disciples. He wrote this. Hamsadutta had just joined in 67, I think, maybe 68, but in 67, he had only been a devotee 1 or 2 years. And Prabhupada was saying he could become a guru and take his own disciples. Soon, not right then, but after they passed those courses. Prabhupada again spoke of those courses years later, but he never again said that those who pass the courses will become gurus. And that very same Hamsadutta tried to take his own disciples in 1977. Now 2 years past 75. And Prabhupada was, saying, what is the use of creating rascal gurus? He was saying he's not qualified. And then he said in that April 22nd, that same conversation, April 22nd, 1977, which was only 3 weeks before he announced he's going to leave this planet soon, he said that he said, I want to give my order. Now you become Acharya, you become authorized. But I am waiting. He said, because I can't remember the exact words, but the training must be complete. Huh?
Training should be over.
Yeah, the training must be complete. And so he was first. So Prabhupada wanted us to become gurus. He did want that. He did want that we would take disciples. He wanted that, but only if we're actually qualified first. So April 22nd, 77, just 3 weeks before he left, he's saying no one was yet qualified. So he was still waiting to give that order. So all those other times he wrote that, I want you to become guru in the future, were not orders. It was Prabhupada expressing his desire that we would become gurus. But if you're not a pure devotee, absolutely, Prabhupada held position of guru to the highest standard. You have to be an absolutely pure devotee. And if you're not, Hamsadutta, by 1977, he had been GBC for many years. He was preaching. He actually preached and made a lot of devotees. He made a lot of devotees. And he was good in kirtan. He was, a lifelong trustee of the BBT. He was a senior devotee, and he had a lot of qualifications. But Prabhupada said, what is the use creating rascal guru? Referring to him. If one's not fully qualified, then one can't become a guru. Prabhupada held it to the highest standard. Bhaktisiddhanta did not select anyone before he left, and Prabhupada said because he saw no one was yet qualified. Including, it would include Srila Prabhupada. He said, if Prabhupada wrote, that if he had seen someone who was actually qualified, he would have selected. But Prabhupada hadn't manifested his qualifications yet at that point. So the true Acharya holds the position to an absolute high standard, which I have given the example of a medical doctor, a medical professor at the university. He's teaching students, let's say, heart surgery. It's a complicated process. Not every doctor can just go and perform heart surgery. It takes a lot of training. So this professor's teaching it in the university. But he's getting sick, and he knows he's going to leave soon. And his students are fairly new. They're not ready yet. But he's going to leave. So he just goes, I award all of you to master's degree in medicine. You can all now practice and become, heart surgeons. And he gives them all a degree before he leaves. What kind of a university would that be? Who gives out degrees to doctors who are not fully trained? Or what sort of doctor would that be? They don't have the full training, and they're going to go and start doing heart surgery on people? They're going to be killing people. They're not going to be saving them. You can't, and as a spiritual master, bona fide spiritual master, is a soul surgeon, is my example. If you make a mistake on the heart, that person dies one lifetime, finished. But if you make a mistake and mislead someone spiritually, you could mislead them for many, many lifetimes. It's much more important that one be fully qualified. And anyway, but the GBC ISKCON are saying, they were encouraging Prabhupada's disciples, come forward and be guru. All you need to do is basically get their rubber stamp of approval. Chant your 16 rounds, follow the 4 regulative principles, and somebody is requesting you to take initiation, and another guru or another GBC says, yeah, he's fine. We'll pat him on the back. He'll join our club. Where's the qualifications, Hamsadutta was doing all of that. He was lifelong, trustee of the BBT, GBC original GBC member for many years. So sannyasi, preaching, making devotees all over. But Prabhupada, what is the use of creating a rascal guru? Yeah, I guess we'll meet again. So we're over time. So we can,
We'll take lunch break.
yeah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada.